Hey, Idahosa Ness here from mimicmethod.com, where we learn foreign languages by ear the natural way so we can connect with other human beings. And in this video, I want to talk about finding love in a foreign language, finding that romantic connection in a foreign language. We do lots of surveys with students who take our courses, and I'm always surprised by the number of people who put down as their number one motivation for learning something to do with the romantic connection. And it's either they have a significant other, a boyfriend, a husband, a girlfriend, a wife, who is a native speaker of the language they're learning, or they want to have a significant other in that language. In this video, I want to share with you my personal experience and be open and candid about my experience. I speak 7 languages, and I actually have romantic experience in each of the languages that I speak. So just over the years, I've acquired experiences and observations and insights about romance and dating and intimacy in different languages. So I want to share it with you in hopes that you might find it useful. And I'm going to organize it around 4 different themes. The first is about our attraction to the exotic. What's that about? Why is that there? Second theme is cultural differences. What should you expect when you're going to a completely different country, completely different culture, and you're trying to find romance and do courtship? Third is about lovers as teachers. So we have these people with whom we're sharing a romantic interaction. How can we also use them to improve our language abilities? And what are the different challenges you might run into for that, trying to learn with a significant other or a partner? And the final thing I want to talk about is the language of intimacy. And when you get close to somebody who speaks a foreign language, the kind of things that I've noticed appear in these multilingual contexts that are quite interesting. So here we go, first time talking about these things so openly, so hopefully you find it useful and you enjoy. First theme, the attraction to the exotic. So I'm gonna tell you a story. When I was a teenager, I was 16, I only spoke English, and I was living in the suburbs of Pennsylvania, bored out of my mind. And I was a bit of like a kind of a nerdy student, as you might have guessed. As a 16-year-old dude, I had very few priorities in life, and perhaps the top one was my interest in women. But I wasn't really successful at that. I was kind of dorky. Looking back on it, there's probably a couple of girls who had crushes on me, but I was just too completely oblivious to even notice that. And even if I did, I would have just said all the wrong things and been super awkward and messed it all up. So I was struggling. I was struggling as a teen. And I've got the opportunity to go to Mexico. Now, I've been to Mexico as a kid on a family vacation, and I found it a super interesting place. I had that image in my head, so I wanted to go back and discover it more, as well as learn some Spanish. I was curious about the outside world. And I remember very, very clearly, I was walking down the street. I found the Mexican girls I was seeing very attractive. I was like, wow, like a little 16-year-old kid, wow, so many girls around here, right? And then I remember I'm walking down the street, these girls working in shops and doing stuff, and then they'd be like, and then they look at me like, hey, Dios mío. And I'm like, what's going on here? I got something in my teeth? What's it? And then it just hit me. I was like, wow, here the girls find me super attractive because I'm exotic. No one around here looks like me. You have established your attraction for the exotic. You're dealing with this foreign group of people, and now you're at the stage of courtship. How do you go and find a boyfriend, find a girlfriend, find someone to go out on a date with, right? And the thing is, every single country I've been to, and I've been to a lot, the standards and conventions for courtship are very different, dramatically different. So you should be aware of that. Be aware that whatever you expect as a result of growing up in your home culture, you shouldn't necessarily expect the same things in the foreign cultures. And I'll give you an example. When I was in China the first time, I would meet Chinese girls out and about, and then I would, ask them out on dates. The first time I was on a date with a Chinese girl, I'd take her out to, I think, some kind of restaurant or whatever, and she was just not making any indication of any interest in me whatsoever. Just looked bored, uninterested, was not even really walking next to me, and I'm just sitting here the whole time man, I am bombing this date. There's no chance this is gonna go anywhere. And then after a while, it's kind of gave up. I'm like, all right, well, be a good person and just kind of at least show her, back to her place and all that kind of stuff. So there you go. I'm like, wow, everything, if this was in the US, I'd be looking at the situation man, there's no way any good's gonna come out of this. But then we turn a corner, I drop her off at her place, boom, then she just jumps all over me. I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And it's funny because then I talked to my friends about it, like, yeah, that happened to me as well. That happened to me as well. And then my brother, who lived in China for a long time, is actually married to a Chinese woman. He was kind of like he's my older brother, so he kind of talked game to me, and he's like, oh, listen, this is how it works. China, the culture is a lot about face. And when you're out and about in public, especially as a foreigner, people or Chinese girls aren't going to want to show public display of affection. They're not going to make any indication to show that they're interested in you or all that kind of stuff because they have to protect their face. And they're very aware of other people looking at them and what opinions or judgments they might form about them. For that reason, I'm like, oh, so we think back to flirting in the US, like people would openly flirt. If you're on a date, someone will say things, tell jokes, all that kind of stuff. So I was expecting those sorts of romantic signals, but I wasn't getting any. And I almost just kind of gave up on the whole operation. But then once I learned that, I'm like, this is how things work here, right? Now, fast forward a couple of years and I'm in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Completely different culture from China. And I remember the first time I went out there, I was at a bar and I saw a girl I found attractive and I walk up to her and I start speaking to her. But I'm speaking to her in a way I kind of do like in an American kind of context at the time where I'm like, kind of indirect about it, as being kind of like friendly, like, oh, hey, will you come here often? Or whatever kind of corny stuff I was saying. And she was just not having it. She just kind of like, yeah, I do. It was like, just looking at me like I was the lamest dude in the world. And I'm like, okay, well, so be it. I chatted a little bit more and then walked away. And I'm like, okay, I guess she's just not interested in me. That's how it is, whatever. Wasn't holding anything against it. And then a little bit later, I see this guy walk over, and then he just kind of like, yeah, and he's just like super like aggressive and like on her, and just like saying stuff in her ear, and then she's like walking away like, nah, and then he's like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, whoa, this is like super intense. Like someone needs to stop this guy. And then all of a sudden, they just start making out. And I'm like, what? And then I'm like, I started observing the patterns when I was in Brazil. I'm like, okay, things here are different. When it comes to improving your conversation spoken fluency, you're basically looking at developing two dimensions, depth and variety. Lots of people get opportunity for variety when they travel to a country or when they go to like a language meetup or all that kind of stuff, which means that you're speaking about different stuff to various different people. But I find that you don't really get a good opportunity for depth until you have a really deep relationship. But it's kind of a catch-22 again, because for you to go deep with someone in a language that you don't quite have any mastery over, you need to be really patient, or more importantly, that person needs to be very patient and very interested in you. So when it comes to romance, that is one of the few motivations people have to do that patience. So I've once again dated and had like a long-term girlfriend in French, for example. When I lived in Montreal, that's where I first learned French, and my girlfriend there was Algerian, but living in Canada. But she spent most of her life in Canada, so she spoke perfect English. And this is a common issue I find with people who write us in. Maybe their significant other is speaking that other language, a native speaker of that language, but they themselves want to speak it, but they've already established a rapport and a relationship in English. So when you come and you start to try to speak her foreign language or his foreign language, you run into difficulties. And I had this with my Algerian ex-girlfriend, where I wanted to speak French and she'd be like, this is so weird. I don't put you in the French category. It doesn't feel natural for me to speak to you in French. So over the years, I've kind of learned ways to deal with that. And step one is you got to power through, because when you have the English there as your crutch, you're always going to want to fall back on it, and your partner's always going to want to fall back on it as well. So you just got to be kind of stubborn about it. But once again, it's all based on personality. Some people aren't really comfortable being stubborn, and they want to kind of adapt more to whatever the other person wants in a relationship. So if that's you, then you might need to look for speaking opportunities outside of that relationship. That might be too difficult and fraught. But sometimes you find people who are very patient and very encouraging. And so for example, when I learned Italian, I was actually dating an Italian girl, and I would like try things out, and then she smile and be like, nod and like, good job, blah, 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 and give me words. And I'm like, yeah, good for me. So once again, everyone's different. You can have Your partner can be very kind of encouraging and nurturing, or they can be kind of like they can laugh at you, make you feel self-conscious. But that's fine because that's what makes that person good in other areas of life as well. Who knows? Final topic is the language of intimacy. Now, as we said, language is a tool for human connection. It's what we use to deepen our relationship and understanding of each other. No other place is this more true than in the romantic context. Even within people who are speaking just one language, monolingual couples, you'll often find couple language emerging. And I always tell people that all language really is a big inside joke. And you think about those inside jokes you have with your most intimate relationships, your family, your friends, you kind of invent words, you kind of invent phrases and references and all that kind of stuff. For example, when I was a kid, we in our family had a word, itigidi. And whenever my dad would, wanted me to pass him the salt at the dinner table, he'd say, hey, pass me the itigidi, right? Or my mom would, want the TV remote or look for her keys, like, hey, where's the itigidi? And the thing is, my mom's Nigerian and my dad is, American. And they met in Nigeria. So my mom speaks several Nigerian languages, and we have random words in our family that my mom would say to us, like "lade," like come here, and like "igbomazaye," like all these different these different Nigerian words. But there's no Nigerian language. There's multiple languages in Nigeria. My mom happens to speak a few of them. So I remember one day I came back and I was like, hey mom, all these words I know, I kind of have an intuitive sense of which language they belong to because they all sound different. And I'm kind of going through an inventory. I'm like, okay, Ojare, this is like a Yoruba thing, and like Lade, this is Edo, which is her native language, and then this is Hausa. And then I got to Itigidi. I'm like, Itigidi, like, what is Itigidi? I can't really match that to any of these languages I've heard. Is it Hausa? Is it Igbo? What's going on here? And then my mom is like, cocks her head back and starts laughing. She's like, Itigidi isn't a word, it's a place. I'm like, what do you mean? And then she goes on and tells me this story. My parents met in Nigeria. My dad was there for a teaching fellowship, and they're in northern Nigeria. My mom was studying there at university, and it's a desert, kind of, middle of nowhere, kind of lots of places in there in northern Nigeria. And one day they're driving around in northern Nigeria, and my dad starts freaking out because he hasn't had caffeine all morning, and he's like sweating. He's like, oh, I need like a Coke or a coffee. And my mom's looking at him like, what's going on with these weird Americans in their coffee? So they pull over into like a random village, and they start wandering around, scouring this random village in the middle of the Sahara Desert for coffee or a Coke or something like that. And they can't find anything. And then they see this guy, and he's like walking down with like a big bag of rice on his back, and he's like walking. He's like, excuse me, sir, do you know where we can find some coffee around here? And he's like, eh? Coffee? Here? In Itigidi? And then my parents just burst out laughing, right? Because the guy was just like, yeah, you gotta find coffee here in Itigidi, right? Here in Itigidi. And then it was such a funny shared experience for them that for the rest of the ride, they're kind of like replaying and recanting that tale, like Itigidi, Itigidi. And then over the months go by, they don't tell a story anymore, but they keep making reference to it just by saying Itigidi. And then it starts to kind of transform into a general word for think. Hey, pass me the Itigidi. What's that Itigidi over there? What's the name of the Itigidi thing, right? And then they have kids, and then we don't even think about the backstory. We just start using the word, because that's how language learning works. You just look at the sound, say it, Itigidi. So I'm saying Itigidi, I don't even know what it means. And then it turns out that there's a whole backstory to it. It's all one big inside joke. And it's funny because that same kind of experience I've had with every single girl with whom I've been intimate for over a long period of time. We have a rapport that builds little inside jokes. I won't tell you any of them right now, but there's lots of things that refer to objects that just a word that makes no sense. Or another common one I find for myself and other people is different kind of grammar mistakes or language mistakes, or you just use an awkward word to describe something, and then the other person thinks it's hilarious how you say that, and then she starts saying the word just to make fun of you, and then you both start saying the word, and then you both just use the word like it's a normal word. So it's interesting because within the language itself, just by referencing the word, you can both of your minds to that shared experience, and as a result, deepen and establish that intimacy. So that's the part of this that I find the most interesting, is that language is a vessel for kind of structuring and storing our shared experiences and thus connecting us on that plane, on that level. I remember when I started dating a girlfriend of mine who's from Germany, and I actually met her in Vietnam, and then we started texting for a long time, and then I just met her in one night, and then I left Vietnam, and then we were texting for a long time. And I remember while we were texting, and then we're starting talking on the phone, and then she speaks good English, but like struggled here, and then I remember thinking to myself, like, I like this girl a lot. There's no way I'm gonna let our relationship go on without me being able to understand her language. I don't want her to be struggling and looking for the word or getting frustrated and giving up an argument just because of my lack of language understanding, especially given the fact that that's what I do for a living, right? So I remember I was on the phone with her one day and I was feeling kind of cocky too. I'm like, hey, listen, I'm gonna learn your language. Watch. And she's like, oh yeah, really? I'm like, yeah, watch me. And then I remember fast forward a few months later, we're actually dating now, seriously. And then we're getting into a fight in German. And then she's like yelling at me and she's angry at me. And then my mind flashed back to that moment. And I actually made the joke. I'm like, yeah, one day we're going to get in a fight in German. And I'm going to point this out to you. And then we're going to break up the fight that way. And then boom, exactly how it happened. We're having this fight. I'm like, ooh, I remember saying that. And I told her, stopped her, broke the fight. We're feeling great, Yeah, so really that's what it's all about for me. Like, when you meet someone, you want to get to know them. That's what intimacy is about. That's what romance creates the opportunity for. And one way we understand ourselves is through language. So if you're single and you're ready to mingle and you're also ready to learn a foreign language, then I would highly encourage you to take this opportunity to leverage that deepest of human motivations to push you forward up that mountain of all the struggles of overcoming the language barrier and figuring out how to move your mouth in different ways for language and figuring out all these different grammar, all these different things. It's really worthwhile. Being able to get in a fight and then make up and then laugh and cry in various languages is one of the great privileges that I've been afforded in my own life. So part of the reason why I'm so passionate about the work that we do here at the Mimic Method is that we get to create that experience for other people. So if you enjoyed this video, please like it. If you have your own funny stories or experiences finding love in a foreign language, please share in the comments. Share this video with your current ex or perhaps future lover and get their opinion on it. And then of course, always subscribe for more videos and more content on language learning and general life issues. All right, guys, thanks for watching.